We are back. Sam Seder on the Majority Report. It is a pleasure to welcome to the program Brad Polumbo. He is a journalist and policy correspondent, the Foundation for Economic Education. Brad, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me, guys.
So now, Brad, you reached out to me, I think it was on Twitter, and wanted to have a debate about student debt forgiveness. This was before Biden made his announcement. Still relevant as to whether or not it's a good idea or whether there should be more of this. And so we figured let's do this. So let me just, before we get into the specifics about this, let me just ask you just a couple of questions. These are just straightforward that I want to just get a sense of, like,
sure,
give people a sense of, like, what your perspective is on this. Are you for the idea of free college at all?
No.
No idea?
No.
Okay. And what about, like, free pre-K education in this country? Like preschool, pre-K?
I've done a lot of work on higher ed policy. I can't say I've given universal pre-K fair scrutiny to weigh in.
And what about free K through 12 education?
Yes, I believe in school choice, but I do believe in taxpayer funding for K-12 education.
Okay. All right. Fair enough. Because if you had said no, then, like, there's no point in, obviously.
I know you've had some debates and conversations with anarcho-capitalists. I'm not an anarchist.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to, no, there's some libertarians out there who I think would argue against state subsidized K through 12 education. So, I just wanted to get that out of the way, because if we did this for a half hour and you didn't believe in any free education, I think it would certainly color this. Okay, so what is so why don't you lay out your argument as to why we shouldn't have any student debt relief?
Well, I think I'll start by acknowledging college is way too expensive, and we can talk about the reasons why. But I think that student debt cancellation, it really means debt transfer to the taxpayers. And I think it's fundamentally immoral to make other people pay. It feels like these days that everybody goes to college, but actually only 1 in 3 Americans over age 25 has a bachelor's degree. They hold almost all of the student debt. And they also happen to earn a lot more on average. That's why people go to college. So when you ease a burden from them by transferring it on to the general public who all pay taxes, you're essentially comforting a relatively affluent slice of society. Not everybody is, but a better off slice of society at the expense of taxpayers, in part, who didn't even go to college. So I think it's pretty unfair as a matter of policy. It's like putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. It doesn't solve any of the problems. That's kind of the general gist of the position.
Okay, let me start with saying I agree with you. It is a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. And I would like to see a free or as close to free college option in every state in the country as we can get. You know that, and I'm sure you know that the sort of suggested that college is way too expensive, that the price of college today relative, I guess I had a figure from 1963, is 37 times higher. 37 times higher for a 4-year college than in 1963. And just to give put that into context, $1,000 in 1963 would be worth, with inflation, $9,700 today, $9,700. So you've got the price of college has increased four times more or less than inflation has over the course of the past 60 years, let's just call it 59, I think. So so I agree with you in terms of the Band-Aid on a bullet hole. In terms of the morality of having taxpayers pay for debt relief in some fashion, we do that every day. And we don't just do it for college students, we do it for people who buy homes, which of course is, I think, statistically even more of higher income people than those who have student debt relief, because we know that about 35% of those people, even though you're talking averages, you're not talking actual means, you're not talking individuals, 35% of them never get a college degree who have student debt. But in terms of homeowners, we give a mortgage interest deduction, which benefits.
That's not quite the same, though.
Well, it's not this, but I mean, if I rent or I own a home, like, we encourage home ownership by giving a reduction in taxes. And that is in terms of the government, right? Which, if you look at the ledger, that means less money coming in than would otherwise come in because we give them a tax deduction.
Yes, but there's a moral difference, if I can just say, between letting people keep more, and I actually don't support the mortgage tax deduction, to be clear, but there's a pretty big moral distinction between letting people keep more of their own money and transferring money from one party to another. So I just don't think they're real. It's kind of apples and oranges.
All right, I want to get to this whole thing you keep hitting with morality, because, you know, we can talk about morality, but I think people could say it's immoral to benefit wealthy people who can afford a house as opposed to people who can't and rent. But I mean, morality is, we can get to the morality question. But we also do that we subsidize businesses all the time. I imagine you're also against that. I mean, so it's not.
Two wrongs don't make a right, though. We shouldn't do more bad things because we already do some bad things.
Well, I don't necessarily think those things are bad, and I do think sometimes, doing the same for one group of people as we do for another can balance out things. In fact, but we also, I mean, you don't agree with any type of government subsidies on anything except for K through 12. You're okay with that?
I mean, I'm a classical liberal, so I believe in a small role for government, national defense, interstate infrastructure, right? I'm not a total anarchist here. Education to some degree, right? The reason I view college is different.
Let me ask, just while we're there, how do you make that distinction between the education you get through K through 12 and the education you would get through, let's say, K through 16?
Well, the biggest difference is you're an adult versus a minor. The other one is the bare minimum that you need to participate in society. But college degrees, like I said, a lot of people still don't have them, and they earn you $1 million more on average over your lifetime, right? They're an investment in your future earning potential. And I think it's fair to ask people to pay off an investment in themselves rather than they get the huge increase in lifetime earnings, but other taxpayers who didn't go to college have to help pay for that. That's part of why I think it's pretty unfair.
Can I just say that I think the $1 million average thing is a little bit misleading, because it's the classic case of, if Bill Gates and I walk into a room, the average wealth that we have is in the billions of dollars, and I can assure you that I do not have billions of dollars. So when we look at that, we have a wealth inequality issue here. But we also know that, like, when you talk about the value of a college education, accruing an extra $1 million in terms of, a lot of that also has to do with wealthy people, right? Like, I mean, I think you must observe this as well, that, like, depending on the college you go to and the money you have when you enter into that college, the value of that degree is actually enhanced by how wealthy you are when you enter into that college, because you get money, you get jobs by networking. I mean, this isn't a blanket statement, but in the main, the fact of the matter is, wealthy people, if you control for college, make more money. If you're wealthy at age 18, you're going to be that much more wealthy at age 55, regardless if you control for college education or any other factors, simply because you swim in a sea of wealthy people. So my point is just that figure can be misleading in terms of. But
there's another aspect to it, though, Sam, which I think you're right. Obviously, it takes money to make money. There's some social capital. Like, all of that's true. But on the other hand,
I'm not saying it takes money to make money. I'm saying that when you're from money, you
Right,
end
you
up
have
making
social
more money.
networks.
Yeah.
Sure. I'm sure that's true. It also matters a ton what you choose to study, though. And if you look at the different majors, they have huge differences in their starting salaries. And this is information that young people know going into their college when they're sophomores, they're choosing a major. They have this available to them. It is, I think, legally required, but I'm not 100% sure. But almost every college has this. Our graduates in this department earn this on average. And if you choose to study something like philosophy or poetry or anything, they might be very great things to study, right? But you know that the starting salary for that's going to be $40,000, $50,000, and you know we need STEM majors. So when you take away, when you socialize the cost of education and you push it onto taxpayers with cancellation or with free college or whatever, you're removing that market incentive. If people actually had to pay for their own college and pay for their own student debt, it would drive more people to the in-demand areas like STEM because they pay more. And that's actually what we need. We need an educated workforce, but not all degrees are created equally. And we don't need more people in many different majors. Where there's in healthcare, in STEM, there's a huge shortage. But as soon as you take the costs and benefits away and push them onto taxpayers, you no longer have those market forces pushing us towards productivity. And instead, people can study whatever they want. They can study for how many years they want. Another angle on this, Sam.
Well, hold on. Let me just take you there,
sure.
and then we'll get to that. Because in the world that you're talking about, only wealthy people would study art. Only wealthy people would study philosophy. Only wealthy people would study English. Only wealthy people would study civics. Only wealthy people would study archaeology or study anthropology, or only wealthy people would. Our humanities would only be dominated by people who enter into college wealthy because they would be unencumbered by the concerns that you're talking about in terms of like, I need a return on investment here. I mean, you're talking about, just to be clear, I mean, and different people can have different opinions about this, but the society you're talking about is where we do not provide higher education to people who are anything but wealthy in terms of just being educated, right? Like you need to go in and really for you, higher education should be strictly vocational.
It's an investment.
Strictly vocational for the non-wealthy in this
If your college degree isn't going to earn you enough to be able to pay for it, yeah, I think it's probably not a good idea. If it's not a good individual investment, I don't see why it would be a good societal investment. It's not that only wealthy people.
I just want to be clear. You don't think that there is value to society to have a wide range of socioeconomic people be teachers or be archaeologists or be social workers, or
they can still be those things. They're just, let me give you an example.
They're just going to live in horrible debt.
I had a gym teacher in high school who went to Brown. And let me tell you, my public high school, I'm sure, pays their gym teachers far less than they deserve to have to put up with kids like me, right? She shouldn't have gone to Brown to get a degree in physical education. I'm sure she's buried in debt. I even have talked to her about it. She should have gone to Salem State in Massachusetts, where she could have gotten out with minimal debt. Or she should have gone to a community college and then a state school for 2 years to get that master's degree.
Did she know she wanted to be a gym teacher when she entered Brown?
She chose to major in physical education, so I don't know what else you'd go.
Physical therapy. Maybe she wanted to help kids. And I'm aware of Salem State. I'm from Worcester, and so
Oh, okay. I'm from Bellingham originally.
All right. Well, yeah, that's what I figured. Bellingham. I'm joking. But okay. So and I would imagine when she went to Brown, the cost of Brown was also significantly cheaper than it is.
Well, she's
today.
pretty young. She's not that much. She wasn't that much older, so I'm sure it was still pretty crazy expensive.
And so we should, in your perfect world, elite universities where you get exposed to different people and different ideas and where you would have a commingling of socioeconomic strata, that's bad because the market doesn't favor that. We should not.
No, it's not that it's bad, Sam. So it's that we'd have to have one of two things. One, these universities like Harvard they give huge amounts of financial aid, first of all, and that's great. I'm not saying they shouldn't do that. Secondly, you could still go. All you'd have to do is go to a private bank, convince them to give you the loan, which they'll do looking at an ROI. Will you be able to pay this back? And we're not bailing out the banks in my scenario. So there's none of that happening.
We did do that, though. We do. I mean, now we own, I mean, as a government, we own a lot of debt that originated as private.
But I'm against that. And so what you'd have to do is you'd have to go to your private, because I think the federal student loan programs have been shown to really have jacked up the cost of college. Every dollar they give out in loans.
We'll get to that in a minute. But
okay, but I'm saying in a private system, it's not that low-income people or people from modest beginnings wouldn't have access. It's that they would have to say, okay, I'm going to go study engineering. A bank will give you a loan if there's a good chance you'll be able to pay it back. That would be a thing. Right now, they're crowded out because the government does all the loans, and then taxpayers are ultimately probably going to be on the hook for a lot of it.
Okay. I mean, I think, to the extent that taxpayers are on the hook for all the tax cuts, I mean, that we have.
Tax cuts aren't the same. That's people keeping their money, Sam. It's not the same as a transfer.
It's not their money. It's not your money.
It's your money. The money you earn and get a tax cut on it's your money. Hey, you earned it.
Dude, that money's the U.S. government's money.
Not if they let you keep.
Pick up a piece of paper on your desk.
Okay.
Tear it. You are safe from the government coming after you. Now do that with a $5 bill. You're not allowed to do that. It's the government's money. We have it, they print it, and we have ownership for a period of time. But the fact is, it's the government's money.
So you think everyone's incomes are actually just the government's money that they're going to let us decide how much to have? I think we have very different views of property rights, which I knew that coming into
100%. And we also have a different view of what is valuable to society. In my mind, it is valuable to society to have an educated population, even if that is not measured in the amount of money that they earn.
Those market signals are telling us what's in demand, what our society needs. We need more doctors. Right. We need more engineers. We don't need more English majors right now. And when we do, the salaries will go up.
But aren't you guys for human freedom and expression? Isn't that the big thing that folks who are libertarian?
But pay for it yourself. You want to study English? Be my guest. I'm not saying you shouldn't be able to.
Wait a second. So you don't accept that money is a constraint on human freedom, while at the same time, you can't achieve, for instance, you're basically saying to me that if I want to be a social worker, or I want to be an archaeologist, if I don't have the money to do that, you think that society should not participate in any way in helping me achieve that goal?
No, you'll be able to get a loan if you're going to be able to earn enough.
Well, now I'm going to be saddled with,
or you can go to community college.
Enormous debt I'll be saddled with.
Community college is practically free, right? Compared to, it costs extremely small amounts of money, and anyone can go to a community college for 2 years, get an associate's degree with almost no debt, then go to a public school, finish their bachelor's degree. Sure. In archaeology, and then go to your public school. You'll have a little bit of debt if you do 2 years at a state public college, and you'll have a degree and go work. That's fine. I'm just not willing to pay for it. Sam, let me just get personal for a second. I went to the University of Massachusetts. You're a Massachusetts guy, right? Had a scholarship. I could have gone to Boston College, right? I could have gone somewhere bougie. I worked from a week before my first year started as a security guard working nights, all to avoid debt, all right? I got out with very minimal debt. Turns out I'm a sucker, right? I should have taken it a lot easier, ran up 10K, and Uncle Joe would be making other people pay it off. And now I'm going to have to pay more in taxes.
Oh, wait a second.
So that other people
had debt?
didn't.
You had debt, or you have paid off your debt?
Very minimal debt, small amount, so far less than
so you did get some debt relief?
What?
You did get
it's paid off.
Oh, so you don't have any more debt?
I don't have debt. No, I don't have any student debt.
Okay. And so you resent that the other people are getting that debt. Do you own a home?
Because I have to pay for it.
No, I understand. Do you own a home?
I do.
Oh, okay. And what if someone says, I resent the fact that you pay your mortgage you decided to take this loan, and why do you get a tax deduction for it? Why does the U.S. government?
If you ask me, vote yes or no, get rid of the tax deduction, I would say yes, get rid of it. So it's not a comparable example. You can't pin me down for that. I don't support that, right? But also, again, that would be me keeping my own income more from this deduction, not getting somebody else's money to pay for my education. It's still apples. We're not going to see eye to eye on that, but it's still apples and oranges.
Well, I don't know. I mean, the government expends money on your public school education. The expenditure on this debt is the same thing. It's just happening afterwards.
It's taking from taxpayers and giving it to other people.
Right.
Whereas me getting a tax deduction is me keeping my own money. It's not me getting somebody else's money.
Well, but in terms of the government's ledger, it's the exact same thing. It's income that would have otherwise been
public. Yeah, sure. But it's morally different, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you have your set of morals, but again, your moral world is one in which only wealthy people deserve to go to the highest institutions of learning and have a free range as to what they can do.
No.
Poorer people are constrained by a return on investment.
Study something productive will be able to go and pay it back, and we won't have society subsidizing people.
We just said the same thing.
Gender studies and then work at Starbucks.
Yes, we just said the same thing. It's just that you said it in a way that makes it sound less real than it is. The reality of what you're saying, that you need to have a return on investment, is that only people who are wealthy can afford to go into professions which have a income to debt ratio that would sink less wealthy people.
A poor person who's going to study engineering and gets a loan will still be able to pay it back.
I'm talking about professions that don't have an income to debt ratio. So for instance, if I go, like you say, you're a gym teacher who you think is an idiot because she didn't go to Salem State as opposed to Brown, you think that only wealthy people...
I don't think she's an idiot. I think that was a bad choice.
Okay. Wealthy people can go to Brown and be a gym teacher or some other job that's not going to pay them. But people who are not wealthy, they got to go to Salem State.
Sure. Yes.
Okay. So we see.
My values start with pay your own way in life as much as possible. And you're saying that I have a human right to make other people pay for me to study basket weaving at Brown and pay $70,000 a year.
Are you in favor of the estate tax? Because your principle from the get-go is people should pay their way through society. So how about this? Can we agree on this? Students of wealthy families, their families cannot contribute to their education. They should pay their own way.
Why wouldn't they be able to do that?
Well, I was just going by your principle, which you have to pay your way. But if you have generational wealth, then that's okay too. So you can inherit money.
Sure. Yeah. Why wouldn't you be able to? Well, if your family counts as paying your own way, sure.
Oh, I see.
I mean, not everyone's equally lucky. Yeah, I agree. Some people are born rich, some people are born poor. But yes, that's just reality.
It is reality, but how we decide as a society to address that disparity is actually just a choice. Your moral choice is luck will dictate people's trajectory through a life in society. My moral choice is that as a society, what we should be doing is attempting to allow everyone as much freedom in terms of how they actualize themselves. That's the more moral choice. That money
at somebody else's expense.
Yes, and because everything is at somebody else's expense. None of those people who inherited money from their families didn't do so at somebody else's expense. None of them. You think that wealth can be created, intergenerational wealth that can be created, doesn't come at the expense of other people?
It depends how it was originally created, but a lot of economic interactions are not zero sum.
Well, give me an example of somebody who has of a family that is worth $5 million that didn't do it at the expense of other people.
Sure. A businessman came up with a product, sold it to a bunch of people who were happy to pay the price because it was more valuable to them. Well, let's get a little bit more specific. Let's get a little more specific. This businessman, what kind of product is it?
Is it a factory? I mean, where
The
are
guy
they
who
using
discovered
public?
buffalo wings. That's my favorite food. How about that? And then he was the first person to open up a shop selling buffalo wings. He sold them for a price. Everybody loved them, was happy to pay for them. He built a whole empire of buffalo sauce. Now it's in every store. He's made millions of people happy. They got a product
So
they were
his
willing to pay
trucks
for, and
go
he's made
off.
a bunch of money.
His trucks, which have wear and tear on roads in a way that, let's say, a car doesn't, subsidized by society, my tax dollars, drop those chicken wings at the chicken wing store. I mean, he's doing that with my cost. That's just one cost that's associated with it. The FDA or the USDA, which makes sure that I can trust that those chicken wings are not going to give me salmonella till we get cuts on that. That also enhances his business, right? I mean, all of this comes at the expense of other people. Never mind the idea of the workers who have produced, have used their labor for the production of this, but just based upon what society has given that person and how much value they got out of what society did. Like,
But they also pay taxes right back into the same roads. Lots of them, if they're making a multi-million-dollar business. So I don't understand.
But they don't pay taxes at the beginning. I mean, look, if you give me $100,000
payroll taxes as they go every day, all the time.
Well, those payroll
Massive
taxes
amounts.
go to the workers' Social Security taxes, and Medicare. But that investment that existed before that guy started selling chicken wings, the roads, the infrastructure, all of what society has built before that guy was probably even born to develop, to invent chicken wings, all existed, and he could not have made a single dollar without those things. So there's nobody in our society.
I'm not arguing against roads, Sam.
Well, then you're not arguing. Then you're also okay with government investment in things that has created wealth for people. And this person also undoubtedly, statistically speaking, if we're going to talk about averages, also benefited from the fact that, like, our society, both institutionally and in terms of government, allowed him to accrue wealth, intergenerational wealth, that certain groups of people weren't allowed to grow. I mean, just in terms of like housing and whatnot.
No, I understand. And I understand that intergenerational wealth for a long time in the Black community and other communities was blocked. But to me, the answer isn't to block anyone's creation of intergenerational wealth. It's to open up opportunity to more people. And I guess this idea that because I think roads should exist, I therefore have to support any kind of expenditure into somebody else that's a indirect
but we were just
investment.
talking about the principle of morality. I mean, I don't usually talk in terms of morality when we talk about policy but if you're going to talk about the morality of some people contributing to the success of other people, my tax dollars going towards, like, somebody who's at public school, if my kids are at private school or something, if you're saying that's immoral, then roads, you are implicating roads. You're implicating all of society's infrastructure.
I'm saying that it is immoral to an investment that's going to make somebody a lot of more money over their lifetime. Other people get to pay for it.
So the fact that he capped it at $125,000.
Well, so it's really capped at $250,000 though, because if you're married, say I'm a lawyer who earns $230,000 and my husband is a stay-at-home husband or my wife is a stay-at-home wife, I'm getting debt relief. It's capped. And listen, a full student debt cancellation without caps would be a lot worse. Full student debt cancellation gives 6 times more benefit to the top 20% than the bottom 20%. Biden's isn't nearly as bad because of the income tax. I'll give you that.
We have 35% of people who never graduated, who never got that degree, who have student debt.
They still do earn more though than high school grads. Some college has a higher earnings than college
how much? Well, actually,
I don't know off the top of my head.
12%. Okay. Would you be okay with getting rid of all of their debt? Is that the issue, that you don't want to give it to people who you presume are making more money regardless of their income debt ratio?
I think it would make more sense, and I'm not even saying I support this, but it would make more sense to say we're simply going to give everybody that earns less than $75,000 $10,000 to do what they want with, or whatever the income threshold is, than to only condition it around college, as if, the janitor doesn't have credit card debt or medical debt that he would need money for. That's the whole problem I have, is if you just want to give out money, why college grads? And the reason why, if we're being honest, Sam, is because college graduates and student debt holders and young people, these are Democrat voters, and they're trying to rile them up before. It's a political thing. It's clientelism. We all know this. We don't have, we can pretend.
You don't think that there are any Republican college grads?
Oh, sure there are, but it's the majority. It's a younger demographic. It's a more educated demographic. These are people that vote much more for Democrats. That's just a fact. Look at Pew, look at Gallup. You know this.
I think that there is. I think that you could argue that the reason why there was the political strength to do this was because of the Democratic electorate. Yeah, I would imagine that.
And the timing, come on, we're a couple months before the midterms, Biden's struggling.
To be fair,
I'm going to give out some money, give free money to my voters.
Let's also be clear. Let's make a distinction. When we talk about $10,000 in student debt, we're not actually talking about $10,000 that is like expended by the government. This involves also interest, right? So the idea of the U.S. government making money on the education of its citizens, to me, that's immoral.
But a lot of it's given at below market subsidized rates. There are unsubsidized ones as well, but a lot of them are subsidized rates. The loans. There's two types of Stratford loans, subsidized and unsubsidized. The unsubsidized, what you're saying would apply to, but the subsidized ones are given specifically at below market rates, much more affordable than you get from a private bank.
Well, that may be more affordable, but it's still interest. Interest is still interest. 6% interest is less than 12% interest, but it's still interest.
Sure.
Right. So, my point being that when we say $10,000 in terms of, you said hand out $10,000 to student loan debt holders, it's not actually giving them $10,000. From the perspective of the government, it's actually just giving them, in many cases, maybe $5,000 and then $5,000 of interest that is accrued that was never expended or collected from taxpayers.
Well, a lot of the interest has actually been forgiven over the last 2 years slowly, but it would really vary wildly case to case.
There was a moratorium on it, but yes.
Yes, and as the moratorium went, the interest payments that were being accrued were waived completely. And the biggest beneficiaries of that were doctors and lawyers, actually, according to the Committee for a Responsible Federal Budget. So, the interest thing will vary a lot.
Didn't you say we need more doctors?
Yes, and they should pay for it. I don't think they need subsidies.
But wait a second. Didn't you just say earlier that we need more doctors and society should make it easy and encourage that? So why isn't the market working?
It is. That's why doctors earn 200, 300 grand. Heart surgeons earn $500,000 because we need more of them.
Okay, but we need more of them, but they're making so much money and their debt is not in any way inhibiting them. So why don't we have more of them? Isn't that the way it works, according to you?
Well, our healthcare system is far from a free market, right? It's not the kind of model I'd advocate for. There's many layers of bureaucracy and regulation and government in there, but we do have huge demand to go into medical school. There's a reason these places.
Wait a second. So for this system that you're talking about to work with doctors, we also have to get rid of Medicare? Well, you just said, why? I asked you, why isn't, you said, let me just see if I got this straight. You said to me that we shouldn't be paying doctors because we shouldn't be providing any debt relief to any doctor.
They can pay it back when they're earning 300 grand.
I understand. And you're saying, but we still have a deficit of doctors in this country. despite the fact that according to your calculation, they should be making money hand over fist. And in your world, that's how people enter the market works. If you're going to make a lot of money, it'll attract more people, but it's not working. And you're saying the reason that's not working is because of government regulation and socialized medicine in this country.
Well, part of it is actually limiting the number of med school seats, which I think is done at the behest of the AMA. But we're getting into terrain here where I'm not 100%.
But that's not the government. I mean, but you said
it's regulatory.
You said government. You said government regulation and socialized medicine, and the biggest socialized medicine we have is Medicare. To the extent that it's socialized,
Absolutely.
It's really socialized insurance. But be that as it may. But so, are you suggesting for the market to work with doctors, we need to get rid of Medicare?
Well, look, healthcare policy is a whole nother thing. I don't necessarily know the answer to that question. But what I will say is this: for you to say the market should be working, one, it is. We're getting a lot more doctors, a lot more people want to go. But right now, we already are. It's not a market in terms of what degrees of people are getting. It's vastly subsidized. People are betting on their loans getting canceled, especially after this. So they'll go into the poetry degree instead of biology.
Wait. You're telling me that people have been betting on getting their loans canceled up to this point?
Oh, absolutely. I was just in college a few years ago, but with Bernie almost winning the nomination twice, the Democrat Party moving from completely opposing cancellation to now being many of them all in on it, even the moderates partially in on it. Absolutely. Young people are taking out debt today that they don't expect to ever have to pay back.
That's fascinating. Do you have any data to back that up other than the anecdotes at UMass?
I not off the top of my head, but I mean, there's a reason it's continued to skyrocket. I mean, I personally advised friends, and even though I'm against the cancellation, right, I knew it was going to happen, at least to some extent. So I'm like, yeah, take some loans, because the worst that can happen
more is going to get canceled?
Oh, yeah. No, absolutely. They're just opening, because think about it. It's just a Band-Aid on a bullet hole. Within, I think it's 8 years, I don't know off the top of my head, we'll be right back at 1.6 trillion in student loan debt. Of course they're going to say, you can't just say, they're not fixing the system. They're not making college affordable in any way. They're just canceling the tip of the iceberg. Okay, they're going to be back demanding more taxpayer money go to this in like 2 minutes.
I mean, I hope you're right. And we should also say that in terms of STEM, according to the Bureau of Labor Statistics, there are more STEM graduates than there are STEM jobs. So I'm not sure what the specific special sauce is for you to go to school. Now, you remember too, right? Like, I mean, if we're talking also graduate school, can you predict, since you've also had the ability to predict that we're going to get more student debt relief, what's going to be the top 5 paying jobs 10 years out from now? I'm a 17, my daughter's looking at colleges, okay? It's going to cost a lot of money. What should she go into right now, also contemplate graduate school, that is going to be the best top 5 rate of return on the investment?
Computer science, coding, no doubt. She'll be making bank. Yes.
Coding. Okay.
Oh, yeah. The guys at UMass, right, with just a public school, my friends who were in coding, they were getting 6-figure job offers
but now you're
from
looking,
the first day.
Yeah, now you're looking backwards, but you
backwards
believe,
like 3 years.
Okay. But you anticipate that 8-10 years out, coding is going to be the biggest profession.
Computer science.
What if this show's not quite that big, but what if everybody was to go into coding?
Well, we've had something happen with this, like with lawyers actually a little bit, where there was kind of a glut in terms of more people going into law school than there were legal jobs, because the salaries are really high and because the law schools were admitting tons of students, and it will adjust, right? If all of a sudden we have more, but I agree with you, it's not a perfect science.
But it will adjust. But I mean, you're telling me that a 17 or 18-year-old should be making wiser decisions about what they're going to go into. And if it adjusts, they're going to get screwed. So to those people, do we give debt relief or no? It's just luck of the draw again.
I mean, I think if we want to talk about very targeted, specific things, We could talk about it. It would really depend. But it's not as if computer science jobs aren't going to be here 10 years. Like, we can predict with a good degree of certainty, we're going to need nurses, we're going to need doctors, we're going to need coders.
You don't think that coding is going to, there's an opportunity for coding maybe to get offshored?
We're booming in our coding centers.
What's the average? What's the average? What would you say the average is? I live in Brooklyn. What's the average per year for your coder?
Right out of college, honestly, I don't know, but I would bet my hat it's six figures, right? I just know that. So look, I studied social sciences. I studied economics, which is the best ROI on any of the social sciences. However, a lot of my friends were in the coding department, and I'm just telling you, everyone wanted to get into this department and couldn't, and was applying and trying because there were only so many seats at the school. They had no shortage of high-paying job opportunities. The idea that they're going to get, some of them are going to get debt relief, right? They're fresh graduates, they're making 130, they'll qualify. It's obscene. It's absurd. These people are going to be they're going to be millionaires by the time they're 35, some of them, and they are going to get some taxpayer relief right now.
Some are, but the vast majority
and none of them are going to be poor. None of them are going to be the working class.
For the vast majority, no, I agree that except for that 35% who didn't get the degree, the college degree, and probably more out of those, this does not target exclusively working class people.
That's what bothers me, though, Sam. On your side, the progressives, they frame it like we care about the working class, we care about the poor. Student debt relief mostly targets the middle and upper middle, a relatively affluent, educated.
That's simply not true. I mean, it definitely captures people who are making $125,000, and I'm sure there are some families where the individual is making more than that and supporting both his or her spouse or living partner. I imagine if that second person is not working, they probably have kids. Sam, do you support
not Biden's plan with the income caps? Do you support canceling all student debt?
I would go up to $50,000.
Okay, well, that, just so you know, look at any analysis, $50,000 per borrower with no income caps would be vastly regressive. It would be the Trump tax cuts and everything you say you hate, but it's a soft spot for progressives where they don't live out their values.
No.
Yes.
But I also would make a free college option in every state. I mean, since we're
free, as in taxpayers pay for it.
Yeah. As in the same way that taxpayers pay for K through 12, I would make it K through 16. And you know what I would do? I would raise taxes so that those wealthy people who got the benefit of the $50,000 debt relief end up paying on the back end even more.
You can't fund all this with just taxing the rich.
Well, no, I can. I definitely can.
Sam,
in fact, not only would I tax the income, I would come for the wealth.
Right, I would flee very quickly. Wealth taxes haven't worked out very well in Europe, have they? Most countries have repealed them.
Well, then good luck to those people.
Just chase all the wealth out of our country. Yes, that's a very good idea.
Wait a second. We're not going to take all the wealth out of our country. I'm not worried about those billionaires. I would take since we're getting my wish list, not only would I get that $50,000, and I'll tell you why. Because if you want to talk about government efficiency, I know you guys like the idea of a smaller government and a less bureaucracy. This creates less bureaucracy. Everybody gets $50,000 debt relief, and then I collect that money on the other end because I already have an apparatus set up to do it. The only thing I got to do is change two numbers. I got to change 10,000 to 50,000. And then I got to change the top marginal rate where I think it's and I would maybe three numbers because I would do capital gains as well. And I would push that up to where it was in the 50s and 60s in this country, which is around every dollar you make over 3 million, we're going to take 90 cents of it. That's what the rate was.
Terrible idea.
In the 40s and 50s.
Sam, let me ask you a question, right? Why do we tax cigarettes? Because when you put a tax on something, you get less of it. And cigarette smoking is bad for your health. You want to put a tax on productive investments, income, and wealth. Those are things we should want more of in our country, not less. And you're talking about 90% taxes on income.
First of all, I dispute the fact that it's productive, that capital gains.
It's a definition of a capital gain.
No, it isn't.
A return on a productive investment.
What's productive about you investing in the stock market?
Well, it's indirect, but what stocks go up and what stocks go down is what businesses perform well. And what.
Explain to me the indirectness of when you buy stocks, you buy 100 shares of Apple, and it goes up 5 points, and you make this chunk of money. What's productive about that investment?
The fact that Apple is worth more as a company because it's getting bigger, it's growing, is why the stock goes up. If you bought Amazon in 1985 or whatever.
Productive? No. You're telling me that Apple's value is reflected in its stock, but I'm asking you, your $100, which Apple doesn't see, what's the productive value in that? What is Apple producing more for society than it would have otherwise?
Because the reason that the stock is going up is because the company is performing well.
Yeah, so the stock is reflective of how the company is doing, but you,
right, and by investing in it, you're picking the productive companies. We're rewarding that with the capital gain. You're just
betting. That's like me saying, like, when I bet on a horse and it wins, I made it run faster.
It's a little different when it's an investment into a company.
But it's not an investment into a company.
What is a company going public?
Selling off their stock.
In return for what? What do they do with it?
What do they do with that money? They put it into the shareholders. Yeah. They buy more stock often, stock buybacks. They offshore that cash, billions upon billions of dollars.
They also invest it, a lot of it.
Well, if they have that much cash reserves, they don't need that money. And so your investment is not really that productive. But so let me ask you this. What makes you think if the government takes that money and redistributes it, that as a society we have less wealth? I mean, what's the difference in terms of societal wealth if let's put it this way, you walk into the room and I walk into the room, or Bill Gates and I walk into the room. If the government takes $1 billion from Bill Gates and gives it to me, the wealth in that room is exactly the same as it was when Bill Gates and I entered.
But future wealth creation is going to go to crap. I mean, if a billionaire can create a super productive company for millions of people and then have all their wealth confiscated, the next one's not going to do it. With 90% tax rate over $3 million is what you said.
Why didn't that work in Kansas?
In Kansas,
you know Sam Brown.
Yeah, I'm familiar with the Kansas experiment, but that's a whole complicated thing that we would need a whole nother. I'll come back on if you want to dive into that.
The Laffer, it was Art Laffer. You're stating the Laffer curve to me. You're suggesting
the Laffer curve isn't always true. It's true at a certain point. Obviously, 100% tax would raise.
I'm not for 100%.
Tax.
I'm not for 100%.
You're just for a 90.
90% over the first $3 million, which is what we had
Jeff Bezos
in the
would have
50s.
Stopped. In what, 1998? And none of us would have the Amazon, because he would have earned $3 million. What's he going to do? Keep going for 10%? Of course not. This is incentives 101.
Well, wait a second.
Would you work if you were going to pay 90% taxes for everything you did after a certain point?
Yeah.
I wouldn't. I'd stay home. I'd sunbathe.
No, if I made $3 million, but you know what I would do if I was Jeff Bezos? I would have probably retired after my first $1 billion.
Well,
wouldn't you have?
Probably not, but I'm not really.
Well, you can't spend $1 billion. You can't. So I mean, the Laffer curve. The Laffer
curve created millions of jobs, delivers things to our doorsteps more affordably and quicker than anyone could have imagined.
But you're arguing that he
would
have stopped doing that if he wasn't making as much money, and I'm arguing that I don't think he would have stopped because he still wants to be.
They still want money. It's just like I'm always amazed by. I love soccer, professional soccer players. How they'll make a deal, they'll make a trade for like my salary will go from $50 million to $75 million. I'm like, what's the practical difference? It seems crazy, but it's how people work. It is how people are motivated.
Well, it's not a practical. It is not a practical difference, and you can still make more money than the next person. It's just
but they're still motivated by it. It's just
what happened in the 50s and the 60s in this country? Why didn't what you're suggesting? Why didn't all of those people? You know what the tax rate was in the 50s, right?
On the income tax?
Yeah.
Wasn't it as high as 70% at one point?
It was 90%.
But almost no
Over
one paid
four-
it back then, though. The brackets,
over
almost
four-
nobody was in the
that's
bracket.
not true.
Sam. It's
400,000
way less than would be today.
$450,000, every dollar you would make over that, 90 cents on the dollar, that existed for almost 20 years in this country. And then in 65, I think it was, 64, somewhere between 64 and 65, it went to 75% on every dollar made over $470,000 annually.
That's obscene. That's immoral.
But, well, okay, you can say it's immoral, but it's not ineffective. We still had things produced. It was a very productive time. And in fact, we had a rising middle class, didn't we? It was called the Great Compression because we had wealth inequality was at its lowest ebb. Maybe
there's
at
like a million different things that are different from 2020 to 1960. Sam.
Well, of course, but
I
you
do think
that's
taking
immoral.
90 cents out of a dollar. I mean, what's 100 cents? If you have to work for free, I mean, that's at that point like.
Well, I know that there are people who
servitude.
like to accumulate things, and so they can have that 10%.
Oh, they can. Oh, thank you. That's very generous of you to let them keep 10 cents of their own dollar.
You're welcome.
You're very kind, Sam.
I think so. I think so. I may be able to move off that to 11%.
Okay.
All right. So, what is your solution for all this?
For the cost of college?
Yeah. I mean, you've made it clear that you do not think that people who don't have existing wealth should have as much opportunity to go to a top college or a college of their choice. They should have a limited a menu of colleges that they go to. If they want to go into if they want to go into a profession that is not going to pay a lot of money. That's a fair assessment of your position, right? That's
it's not very
moral
charitably
universe.
stated, but sure.
Well, but that's reality. I mean, that is the real. That's the reality.
It's a spin on it. Alternatively, I could say that everyone has the right to pursue a college investment of whatever they like. They simply can't force other people to pay for unproductive investments. I could put my spin on it.
Society should not enable people to do anything that isn't going to give them a return, and only wealthy people will be able to afford. The reality is that only wealthy
people want to waste their money. That is their right.
Right. Okay. Well, it's not a waste to them because they don't have the same.
I think it's a waste. They don't have to agree.
Well,
I agree. That's their right.
But the fact is that if I'm wealthy, if I've gotten millions of dollars from my parents, and I know that's coming, I can live a very, very good life, and I can dabble around. Maybe I can be a teacher. Maybe I can be.
It doesn't make your English degree a positive ROI, or but you can absorb that loss and still be rich. Sure.
Right. Okay. Right. Only those rich kids can see the value, though, of a humanities degree. Wealthy people would just be largely more educated in the humanities. That's the result of what you're talking about, right? I think
most humanities education at colleges in America today has become a joke. So if they want that, okay.
Okay. I mean, and you know this because of your economics degree.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I've studied all about great inflation, the absolute state of the modern economy. I mean, the rigor. There are some really depressing studies. Brian Kaplan has a whole book where he shows that, like, the number, I don't have it all in front of me, but the percentage of people who 5 years out from college report no increase in critical thinking, reading and writing skills on a test from before college when they studied liberal arts, it's a shockingly high percentage.
Is there value in that?
Is there value in what?
In people having those critical thinking skills?
Absolutely, but these degrees aren't providing it in large percentages of the time.
So you do see a value in critical thinking skills, but that's not necessarily a return on investment. It's just like you're basically saying,
for
like,
a lot of jobs.
The food sucks here and the portions are too small. I mean, because if you think there's value in critical thinking... Well, I am a big
believer in big portions.
Right. But if you think there is value in critical thinking, that's different than saying there's value in an education because it gives you dollar return. You're sort of arguing what
I'm
I'm
essential
arguing.
component in many jobs, lawyers, the LSAT, all this stuff. So
No, I
yeah, it
understand.
is. But those degrees aren't providing
But not
much
necessarily
of it
in selling cars. You can make a ton of money in
Why
selling
should you
cars.
need a college degree to sell cars? We need more non-college pathways
But
to
you
work in
just
this
said
country.
critical thinking skills are important, and I'm curious as to why they would be important if really your only measure of the value of a college education is its financial return.
Well, because college is essentially a sorting device more than anything. The idea of it as a human capital expansion is more theoretical than actually proven true in the data on it. I mean, this is the whole premise of Brian Kaplan's book.
Explain this sorting thing. What do you mean?
Yeah, college is sure.
Do you think it should be a sorting thing, or do you think unfortunately it is a sorting
I think
thing?
it just kind of is what it is. Essentially, you have people who have different skills, who have different aptitudes, who have different work ethics and habits. And college is and employers don't know who these people are. And college is a very expensive and inefficient way for them to vaguely sort high potential employees from low potential employees.
So you don't see any value in the reason why I ask if you say that, like, sadly, it's just a sorting thing, is that do you think that there is a universe where it's good to give people a higher education? Yes or no?
Sure, but Sam, let me just put it like this. How come when you go to college, if I do 7 semesters and then I quit right before graduation and I don't get the degree, employers, I don't get almost as much nearly as much benefit? It's because, unfortunately, college is really about the degree. We've got this huge degree inflation. It's not actually about the massive expansions in your critical
thinking. But we do the same thing with high school
everything.
Diplomas, right? You get a GED.
The high schools also, it's the same thing. You're sorting people who can't complete their GED. Often it's because they don't do their homework, they don't show up to school, blah, blah. It's not hard to get a GED.
Do you think that's the purpose of higher education, though? I mean, do you think that's the purpose of higher education? That should be the purpose as a...
I don't know that it should be, but I think in practice it is.
Okay. So what do you think? Do you think that we should have higher education so that people can study stuff that's more sophisticated than in high school?
I think you can self-study more things than not in the age of the internet, right?
So you don't think that we need higher education?
I think it should be an option for people, but it should be largely with a mind to your vocation and your return on investment. I don't think,
Okay.
Yeah, if you want to study poetry, I don't know why that you should have to spend $200,000 to do that. Go to your library, go to listen to YouTube lectures, go listen to Sam
Where do you
Seder.
think all of those people who did those lectures and, basically populated most of those books in the library, where do you think they learned about poetry?
At universities in the age before. I mean, okay.
When did this age change? When did universities become?
I mean, you're trying to tell me that the internet and things like Wikipedia and YouTube haven't radically restructured our access to information and how we approach education?
No,
Look at
that's
something
not
like
what I'm
Khan
telling
Academy.
you. I'm not telling you that. I'm telling you that information emanates from human beings. And
Sure, yeah.
those human beings went to university, and that at one point the supply of new people who've gone to university, and I think you've even written how remote learning is certainly not as good as in person, right? Didn't you write something about that?
Well, when it's forced upon kids.
Right. But I mean, if there's no universities,
sure.
then they're forced to do it if they want to learn it. But
I'm not saying there should be no universities. I'm saying there should be. Harvard is going to study English and produce poetry till the cows come home. They've got $1 billion endowments. All I'm saying is I don't see why taxpayers have to subsidize poetry.
Well, I was getting at the question as to what you thought the value of higher education is. If you thought it was a lament that. And I don't agree with the premise that it's simply a sorting thing for businesses, but you feel that way.
When I went to UMass, most people went there to get the piece of paper, get drunk. They learned basically nothing. They slept through half their classes. They cheated on tests. I'm just telling you the honest truth. We can pretend college is really about, growing and learning and expanding your circles. And for some people it is, but I learned far more since I left college doing actual work than I did in these dusty classrooms. I really think it's vastly overhyped. And I think we need more alternatives, more apprenticeships, more programs like Google's doing, right, where you can learn to code outside of a 4-year degree program. Every kid shouldn't have to go to college, because this system that we have now is making a college degree the new high school degree. And all of a sudden,
where do you think we fit in terms of like industrialized nations in terms of like college participation?
I don't know off the top of my head. Probably lower than places where it's free, quote unquote.
But I mean, give me a sense. I mean, for some reason, like other societies think that higher education is important. They could all be wrong. I'm just curious as to where you think we're doing with this. Like, because it sounds like you think that everybody goes to college in this country, and
Oh, I don't think that. I think that's part of why I oppose student debt cancellation is that 2 in 3 Americans over age 25 don't have bachelor's degrees.
Why do you think so many other nations around the world don't subscribe to this notion that higher education is just a waste?
Well, because again, it's associated with a big premium. Your college degree earns you more over a lifetime, but is it actually because you're expanding
even
your
in
brain,
places where there's much more tax rates, higher tax rates too?
Sure, they also tend to have much lower graduation rates because they when it's just
I'm talking
free.
graduates. I'm talking about graduations. I'm talking about graduates.
Oh,
because
what about them?
The U.S. ranks number 5 in folks who have graduated from university, number 5 in the country between the ages of 55 and 64. Number 5. But in the ages of 25 to 34, we're not even in the top 10. In other words, the percentage of graduates in this country has gone down significantly over the past 20 years relative to the rest of the OECD.
Sure. It matters what those graduates are in. If France has 10 times as many, poetry majors as us, but we have enough STEM majors and they don't, then we will be better off than them. So that's sure. I mean, okay. I'm not sure what the significance of that is.
I'm just curious as to why these other countries are so diluted in the value of
well, they have different values. They're not governed in the way I'd want to. That I admit my views as a libertarian are a very small minority. I don't pretend they're widely adopted. I simply think that a lot of them should be, and I'm here to say why.
All right. Well, I think you made a good argument about the immorality of relieving debt to people who hold it in college, and the immorality of all government, I guess, of government largesse in any fashion whatsoever, except for that is helping businesses accrue wealth.
Well, I think the basic needs of society, like infrastructure and national defense, need to be funded by taxes. And yeah, that involves people paying for others. But I think when it's a personal investment like education that will earn you huge sums more over your lifetime, it's perfectly fair to expect you to pay back that yourself. And I think we should focus our efforts on actual ways to make colleges more affordable rather than just putting a Band-Aid on a bullet hole and spending tons of taxpayer money on something that doesn't actually solve the problem.
We're going to run out of time, so I'm going to ask you one more question. How do we make college more affordable?
Well, the first thing we got to do is scale back the federal subsidies. Subsidies have driven up the price about a 61
By subsidies,
cents.
you're talking about the loans.
Yeah, the subsidized loans in particular, the federal loans.
What do you mean by subsidized loans?
They're at below market interest rates. That's what subsidized. Some of them, yeah. So the loans,
reduced interest rates loans. There's still interest. We're still accruing interest, right? The United States still accruing.
Some of them. Yeah, sure. Okay, well, they do have interest on them.
When the moratorium ends, we're still going to be accruing interest on all of this.
Yes, they have interest rates. But the point is that we've massively subsidized demand. And of course, that's going to inflate prices. It's estimated that about for every dollar we spend on student loans, they've jacked up tuition about 50 cents, and that's been captured by the universities. That is a big part of this problem. We can't just massively subsidize demand and expect prices not to go up. We've got to return it to a market-based system. Private banks will only provide loans where they actually are going to be able to pay them off on average. They won't be able to predict it perfectly, but you'd actually have to show, I'm going to study this, my projected income will be this, I'll be able to pay it back. The other side of it, Sam, is that colleges today have massively exploded their bureaucracies. The administrator to student ratios has enormously increased, while professors even in the actual academic side isn't getting the investment. So at public colleges, that should really be reined in. At private schools, I guess do what you want, but I think we need to vastly cut the administrative state. Mitch Daniels at Purdue in Indiana has actually shown us how you can freeze tuition and save families millions of dollars if you enact even a smidgen of fiscal conservatism in how we run these universities.
I would agree that we can put more money towards professors. Frankly, I don't know that Daniels did that in terms of professors as much as he did cutting administration costs, et cetera, et cetera. But you don't think that the incredible disinvestment in state universities in any way had anything to do with the increase in tuitions that are paid by the customers? I mean, because I don't think
that's the root, because you can go back to 1960 or 1970 and college was dirt cheap and there was very little state investment compared to what we have now. It's like, that's not as a percentage wise.
The operating costs have gone from 1/3 borne by tuition to 1/2 borne by tuition. I mean, I will say this. I think there is a lack of evidence for the argument that massive disinvestment, which is real. I mean, it is quite obvious that
they pulled back, sure.
Yes, pulled back significantly since really starting in the 70s and really in the 80s is when we started to see, and then it has exponentially increased over the decades. Whether that has contributed, well, it obviously contributed on a state level because if you're going to a state school, tuition is borne more by, or I should say the cost of operating the college has become borne more by the students who are going. And of course, the lowest, and I'm sure you understand this dynamic, if the lowest price thing gets raised, that creates the opportunity for the other things in that market to raise their prices too. If the cheapest product on the shelf raises its cost by 25%, the more expensive ones are also going to raise theirs by 25% because that dynamic is fairly fixed. And that's what's happened in thing. I think there's an argument that administrative bloat has added to it. I think physical plant, because of competition, has increased. And
UMass was paying its coaches millions of dollars, and we sucked. I mean, UMass essentially.
I would agree. We should cut sports. We should cut sports.
That was one of my takes that pissed off conservatives, Sam, on campus. Was I basically said we should just abolish the football team.
I don't think you necessarily need to abolish it, but you can make it a lot cheaper.
Move it to D3 and cut the budget to 20% because they suck anyway. We pour millions of our tuition dollars into it, and then they could. While I was there, they could not win a game. So
student loans certainly was sort of a neoliberal push to essentially have a market solution. And a lot of those loans that the federal government now owns were originated by the private sector, by banks. After the financial crisis, we bought up a lot of those as part of backing up the private sector, which cuts against the argument that banks can make a good assessment in that thing, is particularly when there's fees to be collected.
The problem is the banks are so intertwined with government and bailouts that in a free market,
we can agree on that, and we can agree on that thing. Of course, we had a freer market back before the Great Depression, and there's a reason why we have the FDIC and all sorts of bank regulation, or we did anyways. But that's maybe a different day. But all right, well. Brad, I really appreciate your coming on. It was fun. I think it was illuminating for people.
I appreciate you having me on and the fact that you actually do debates with people. It's a rare thing these days, and it's valuable.
I know it's hard to find people who will do this, but I appreciate
I found it very hard, and that's why I really appreciate you having me, because not very many people will talk about these things.
All right. Well, thank you. I appreciate it. And we're all
Thanks.
appreciative. All right.
Bye.
Folks, I accept the criticism that I'm getting.
You're getting criticism?
Well, I'm like, out of the corner of my eye, I'm seeing some IMs going like, fun half. In quotes.
Yeah. Well, it's fun
I like
for
that you
you.
thought that we might get the calls.
I know. So I'll just mention this. Bradley, hope not blowing up your spot. Bradley and I, we set an over-under on how long that would take in our little G chat here. And you blew over it, but like we said,
44 and a half.
I said 44 and a half, but I was
Hammered the over.
I was being generous with that line. I said at least you go through 210, and you blew past it.
I got to say that there is really nothing in my life where time just sort of like suspends and just goes away.
No, it's a huge value add for you. We really want it. It's a good thing for like we want to. It's a public good for Sam to debate these guys.
Yeah. And we've got some. Bex from Texas says not fun, but Live Free and Die says I think it's fun. Cucker Tarlson, you missed that Biden took his action because he could do it by executive order. Obviously, a comprehensive legislative approach would be better, but he could do this on his own. Yes, that was not like, it didn't come up, but yes. New Wave Libertarian Communist. Sam, I helped you get in touch with Larry Sharp to set up that debate a month ago. I was part of the Twitter conversation to get Brad on the show to debate. Where do I sign up to be the MR Libertarian debate booker? First off, I would tell you I would not announce that publicly because there could be a lot of anger from people. Fierce Deity says 2021 D1 NCAA hockey champs. That must be UMass maybe he's talking about.
Yeah. I mean, hey, there's people who have come out of UMass, including New York Giants, eventual, hopefully, Ring of Honor member, or maybe not actually, but Victor Cruz, undrafted free agent out of UMass.
Saddled with student debt. So this guy wants to make the loans more expensive, completely ignoring that 18-year-olds have no fucking idea when they get into it. They're taking out these loans regardless of how many documents you make them sign stating they know what they're doing. Of course. It's absurd.
I like that we have a doctor shortage. So that whole like thing where that proves the market is correct because they're getting paid so much. Well, no, we need more doctors and nurses and stuff.
Right.
Actually.
And that is actually the profession where, in terms of just like tuition costs, the barrier to entry is like only for rich people, if you can pay your tuition.
Right. Like anybody, like I'm sorry, but like I think if you came from like particularly low income and worked your way up to be a doctor, I don't care if you're making over $125,000 this year.
Well, the point is that we have a mechanism to means test all of these things. And that means test is called taxes. And the most efficient way to make sure that any policy the government engages in is not regressive, which I would say is probably the only time that folks of Brad's ilk are actually concerned with regressive policies. There is a way to make sure that every policy the government involves in is not regressive. And that is to do it through our tax code. It is the most efficient way. If I give $50,000 or full debt relief, and the only reason why I wouldn't give full debt relief is just because, as a political matter, $50,000 sounds better. Because, and I'll tell you why, because I don't care, and also we should mention, wealthy people do not take out student loans.
Yeah.
That would be, to use Brad's talking points, irrational.
The bad business.
Bad business. Why would you do that? You have the money, why pay an interest on this? But nevertheless, unless you think that like, oh, I can pay a lower interest, on this, and I can make more money in my investments in my gold mine or whatever it is that you own, which is also a business deal. But for the most part, but even if they did, even if we were only subsidizing Ivanka Trump and Jared Kushner and Eric and Donald Trump Jr., we have a very easy way to make sure that policy is not regressive. And the way that we do that is we raise their taxes. We raise taxes on capital gains. We raise taxes on income. We raise taxes on property if you want. We could do a luxury tax. We can do a trading tax. We can do this. These taxes, in many instances, already exist. The apparatus to collect these taxes already exist. The idea that any policy is regressive by the U.S. government, anybody who complains about that, the next thing out of their mouths should be, we need to raise taxes so that it becomes progressive again. Skippy says, Sam, I don't think I've ever disliked a guest as much as this guy. My head hurts. Survived my second debate. No more. It's like literally like the way to like, if I wanted to end this show, I would
just
do
debates
this
every
5
day.
days a week. And like, it would take, I think, like 3 weeks until it's like, we have no more viewers. No more audience. Nothing.
Even like the haters that want to be on this show to debate you all the time would get sick of you.
Yeah.
Stop the show. Nobody's watching.
He wants to debate too
Why am I
much.
going to come on? All right, let's do some quick clips, okay? We'll do 2 clips.
I think 4 is an easy, quick one.
Okay, let's do that. Yeah, I'm sorry. I got carried away. I'm like sweating. It's like I feel like I need a cigarette after that. It was fantastic. I know.
Your cravings are back.
I accept there's something wrong with me. All right?
Yeah.
I'm at least owning it. That's 50% of the Chris
work.
Burdick says, sometimes I forget this is the fun for Sam half.